When I was younger, we used to go visit this lady in our neighborhood's house. And inside of her house was a picture of the Last Supper. And I always thought, when I was a kid, how did Jesus get away with making a reservation for just one side of the table? And it was interesting because I remember asking her once how this happened. And she looked at me and she says, well, Jesus always prepared to throw a good party. This evening we gather to contemplate and to remember Maundy Thursday, the day where Jesus' journey towards the cross continues. And as I think about Jesus' actions in this last moment of his life, he desired to be with his friends. A group of disciples that he called from different places and different backgrounds and different ideologies. A group of friends who were willing to leave everything that they had known and experienced and to follow Jesus. They followed Jesus and witnessed his miracles, heard his teaching, and were so inspired that they felt that they were next to carry on the message of Christ. Also, being Jewish, it was time for the Passover. So they needed to find a place to have that Passover meal. So they go and find a place, and as they are seated at that table, I really wonder what the conversation sounds like. Because at that table, not everybody was on the same page. At that table, somebody had already made a deal to betray Jesus. We often say that on Wednesday of Holy Week, it is the Wednesday that we remember Judas's deal with the Sanhedrin for 30 pieces of silver. And we go into this Thursday, and yet Jesus did not treat any of them differently, but rather showed them an extreme form of hospitality. This man who had been their teacher, who had been their guide, who had told them some of the most phenomenal things in the world, such as, I am the Son of God, and there is a new way to live in the world, which is one of love, which is one of service, which is one of caring for one another. He took off his outer cloak, wrapped a towel around his waist, and he went to wash the feet of his disciples. A job that is not meant for somebody of estate. He took the form of a servant. And it is so important that we see this, because this is the example that Jesus is wanting to leave for his disciples, for them to do. Jesus washes their feet. And we have the disciple, good old Peter. Well, Peter always has a way of saying things that maybe are a little bit Petery. I don't know if that's a word, but Petery. And he says, no, Lord, you don't wash my feet. I must wash yours. And Jesus' response to him says, unless I wash your feet, you have no claim here. In essence, Peter, unless you do what I do, you're not ready for the next part of the job that you need to do. I am doing this to set the example for you of what to do next. And then after he was done, he comes in and he performs the prayers over the bread and wine. This bread and wine and these prayers are inviting everyone at that table into community with one another. Bringing people together even when Jesus knew what was about to happen. And Jesus reminds them even in the words that he says. St. Paul tells us that Jesus said, he broke it. This is my body that is for you. Do this in remembrance of me. He didn't say, think about this in memory of me. He didn't say, sit upon it and reflect. What he said is, do this in memory of me. And this is to call people into community, to come together, to break bread together, and to worship the Almighty God that loves us and guides us. And then he took a cup of wine. This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. Do this. Do this act for one another. Be for one another. Serve one another. Walk with one another. Love one another. Break bread with one another. And as Jesus continues, I kind of go back to thinking about the party at the table. And what these people were all thinking about what Jesus did. What they were thinking about his actions, his words. And I can lay you money, like most Episcopalians, I bet you they all did not agree. But yet, they were all welcomed to the same table. There was no exclusion. There was no, you don't think like me, so you can't be here. There was no, go away, you haven't met the criteria to be at this table. Rather, it was an inclusive, welcoming table that even Judas was welcome to and a part of. To me, that is the this that Jesus is saying to do. To welcome people to this table, to our table, to God's table. No matter how we think, no matter who we vote for, no matter who we love. To come to this table, all that we are, and break bread with one another. Let's think about this community. We all don't agree and think in the same way. Even Brian and I disagree at times. I know, it's surprising. But yet we come to this table and we share bread together. This is the fundamental it that Jesus is telling us to do. And so Jesus ends, we hear at the end of this gospel, Jesus says, if God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Judeans, so now I say to you, where I'm going, you cannot come. But this is the part we need to pay attention. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Jesus tells us clearly, here's what you're supposed to do. do the prayers, come into community, break bread with one another, and love one another. And it makes me think how many times I've heard in TV news, they're interviewing somebody, or I hear people make a comment, I'm a really good Christian. Or as a good Christian, fill in the blank. I will never forget somebody who pulled me aside and was telling me about somebody, and they said, they're not a very good Christian, though. But what's interesting about this is we don't have to label ourselves as good Christians, because everyone will know we are followers of Christ if we love one another. Words are one thing, actions are another. Jesus gives us the commandment to do this in memory of me. And he was preparing his disciples to carry on that message. And now we, in this day and age, 2,000 years later, continue to hear that message. To do this, to do coming together, to do community, to do prayer, to do care for one another, to do inclusivity, to do justice, to do all those things that bring us closer to God. And we will be known as followers of Christ because we will show love for one another.